The one sort of area that I haven't really covered here is sharing data between multiple users. Now that's been illustrated in a number of other webinars, so I'm not going to really cover that in any detail, but I will just point out that things like the entities, the data trees, the fields are basically shared between all users. Now, things like the views, the grid view, the form view, are owned by an individual user. This is why when we logged in as a different user, we had to create a new grid view so that we can see some data, because a grid view belongs to each user. However, we can share forms, these form views and grid views, and the same actually applies to lists and queries. So you can share these between different users. We'll just point out how we do this. So if you find a grid view or a form view that you want to actually share with someone, you right-click on it and you choose the share option. And basically we have three options that we can choose. The default one is the one in the middle. And what that means is the form, in this case, this grid view, it's private to me, meaning I own it, but other users are able to see it and copy it. They can't use it directly, but they can take a copy of it and then use the copy themselves. Alternatively, if I make it private, then the other users can't even see it and can't take a copy of it even. It's completely private to me. The third option is probably the one you'd want to use. It makes the grid view shared, and all users will automatically see it and will be able to use it. So let's let's see this in action. We've got a building blocks grid view. I'll use this because we haven't actually created any views for the other users for this data tree. I'll share it. I'll make it shared to all users so they can see it. And now I'll disconnect, I'll reconnect, this time as biologist. And now when I actually open this data tree, I'll see this form. It's got a little red blob on it to indicate that it's shared, which now means that I'm using the admin's grid view here. I'm using it directly, and similarly, if it was a form, I'd be seeing exactly the same form that was originally created. And so this gives you a mechanism of the admin being able to go in and create some complex forms and then just distribute those for other people to use. The one question that might be in your mind is, what happens if I want to change this form, or this, in this case, a grid view? Because the admin might be a bit upset if me, a biologist, went in and started changing his form and messing it up. And a change actually is as trivial as just doing that. Just changing the width of a column is actually a change in the definition of the form. And by making that change, InstantJChem says, hang on, you're making a change to a form that actually belongs to someone else. What do you want to do? You can't change the form because the admin will get upset. So it's giving you two choices. Firstly, you can take a copy of it, and after that you're now working with the copy, and you can do whatever you want with it because it's now yours. Alternatively, you can say don't save the changes. So what that means is any changes you're making are just transient for this session and are not being saved into the database. So now you can go away and make changes to your heart's content. You can change whatever you want in these forms. You can redesign them completely according to your needs, but when you disconnect and then reconnect, the form will have gone back to its original representation, and we're now working again with what admin originally specified. So you can make temporary changes for the duration of your session, and obviously at any stage you can save that as your own form as well. So you can save a copy if you really want to keep the changes, or you can just work with the shared form transiently and then the changes get reverted when you disconnect. So that's a very brief introduction to sharing, for sharing forms, sharing grid views. Exactly the same would apply to lists and queries. We haven't got any here because we haven't run any queries, but any permanent lists and permanent queries can also be shared in exactly the same mechanism. So that's completes the topics for this webinar. I think I've covered the main features I wanted to do. We started by looking at how to connect to the database. We then had a quick look at the schema editor, which lets us actually manage the tables within the database and make them accessible to Instant JChem and change some settings on them and things like that. We saw how we can set up security and how there are different options for the security you can use. And then once the security is set up, in the case of database-based security, we saw how we could define the users and define their access rights. And then we looked and saw how table and column level access could be locked down further. And finally, we saw a bit about how you can apply a SQL, a bit of custom SQL to filter the data according to the data that each user sees according to their particular criteria that you define as part of that SQL filter. And then we finished off just by having a brief introduction to how you can share items between multiple users.